Hello and welcome. Today, we're going to take a journey deep into the hidden values that really shape our world. We're going to explore the cultural DNA of four global powerhouses: the United States, China, Japan, and Sweden. So let's dive right in. It really gets you thinking, right? Four major powers, all on one planet. But are they running on, well, radically different software? It turns out the answer is a huge yes, and we're about to see just how deep those differences go. Now, you might be thinking culture is kind of fuzzy, hard to pin down, impossible to measure. But what if I told you there's something like a GPS for culture, a real scientific tool that can actually map the values of entire nations with, honestly, surprising accuracy? And that tool is the World Values Survey. Now, this isn't some random internet poll, this is the gold standard. It's this massive, long-term academic project that gives us a solid, data-driven look at what people all over the world truly believe. And it's the foundation for everything we're talking about today. Okay, so how does this map actually work? Well, all that amazing data from the World Values Survey gets boiled down into something called the Inglehart-Welzel Cultural Map. It organizes global values along two really crucial axes, creating this four-quadrant grid where every single country has its own unique address. So let's break down that first dimension, the vertical axis. A simple way to think of this is the God versus the state axis. Societies way down at the bottom are highly traditional. Religion, family, authority, those are the things that matter most. But as you move up the axis, societies become way more secular and rational, putting their trust in logic, reason, and government institutions instead of those older traditions. And the second dimension, that's the horizontal axis, and it's all about security versus freedom. Over on the far left, you've got societies that are all about survival values. Economic and physical security are everything. But as you move to the right, you find societies that really prioritize self-expression. Things like individual liberty, free speech, and just personal happiness. Those become the main goals. All right, now for the really cool part. Let's actually place our four countries on this map and see where they land. This is where their unique cultural codes, their inner programming, just pops right out. And boom, here it is. This table just lays it all out so clearly. You can see how these nations are just worlds apart. They practically own the four corners of this cultural map. Look at Sweden, way up in the top right, super secular, super focused on self-expression. Now contrast that with China in the top left. Also secular, but all about survival. Then you've got the USA, a total outlier in the bottom right, mixing traditional values with self-expression. And finally, Japan, kind of carving out its own unique spot in the top center. Each one of these is a totally different blueprint for a modern society. Let's start with Sweden, which is pushed way out to the extreme top right corner. Researchers often use it as the textbook example of a society built on secular values and just radical individualism, where your personal freedom, your autonomy, that's the absolute highest good. Now, let's jump over to the top left. So, like Sweden, China is very secular, but honestly, that's where the similarities just stop. It scores off the charts on survival values. In this worldview, the stability of the group and economic security come way, way before any individual liberties. And you see this in action, right? Think of those massive state-run projects built for national progress. The focus is always on what's best for the country's long-term survival and growth. And now for what they call the American exception in the bottom right. The US is intensely individualistic, a lot like Sweden. But, and this is a huge but, unlike almost every other wealthy country, it's still deeply traditional and religious. This unique blend of God and freedom shows up in things like America's world-leading rates of private charity, where individual success often gets funneled back into faith-based groups. It's a fascinating mix of self-reliance and traditional duty. And finally, we have Japan. It's highly secular, just like China and Sweden, but it carves out this really interesting space between survival and self-expression. Japanese society definitely values personal freedom and quality of life, but, and this is key, those things are pursued inside a very strong framework of group harmony and social order. It's a delicate balancing act between modern values and collective responsibility. Okay, so we've seen where these countries sit on the map, but how does this abstract stuff actually play out in real life? Let's make it super concrete. We'll compare Sweden and Japan, two secular, wealthy nations, and see how their map positions lead to some outcomes that are, frankly, pretty shocking. Okay, get ready for this, because this chart just flips all the stereotypes on their head. The supposedly radically individualist Swedes are way more likely to agree that parents should sacrifice for their kids than the group-oriented Japanese. What is going on here? How is that even possible? Well, here's the twist. It all comes down to what the word sacrifice actually means. In Sweden, the welfare state pays for the vast majority of the financial costs of raising a child. We're talking healthcare, education, the works. That completely removes the economic burden. So for a Swede, sacrifice becomes a chosen emotional commitment of your time and your energy. It's a different game entirely. And you can see this difference play out so dramatically in the workplace. Get this. Japan actually offers one of the most generous paternity leave policies in the world, at least on paper. But in reality, only about 17% of fathers actually take it because they're held back by this intense work-first culture. Meanwhile, in Sweden, where gender equality isn't just a policy but a core value, 90% of dads take the leave. The culture and the policy are perfectly in sync. So this table sums it up beautifully. You've got two completely different models for society. Sweden's model's all about universal trust, trusting strangers, and having flexibility that's backed by the state. Your security comes from that social safety net. Japan's model? It's built on a specific kind of trust. Trust in your in-group, your family, your company, and a system where your security is centered on your corporation. Two rich countries, two profoundly different ways to live. So we've seen how these models work, but that leads us to the biggest question of all. Why does this cultural map really matter? Well, it matters because these deep-seated values have a direct, powerful impact on maybe the most important measure there is, a nation's well-being and its happiness. Number 4, that's Sweden's rank in the 2024 World Happiness Report. They are consistently right up there at the top. Japan, on the other hand, ranks much, much lower, even with all its wealth and stability. And that huge gap, it's not an accident. You see, Swedish happiness is a direct result of its cultural values, the ones we saw on the map. Living in a high-trust society creates this amazing psychological safety net. A strong sense of personal autonomy means people feel they're in control of their own lives. And that robust social safety net, it just takes away that deep, gnawing fear of economic disaster. In Japan, the story is more about tension. The data shows that people's personal values are shifting. They want more self-expression, a better work-life balance. The problem is, the rigid corporate and social structures, they just haven't caught up yet. And that gap, that space between what people want and what society allows, can really take a toll on overall happiness. And that leads us to one final big thought. As the world keeps changing faster and faster with globalization, technology, you name it, what's going to happen to this map? Are we all slowly going to merge into one single global culture, or will these deep underlying differences stick around and maybe even get stronger, creating worlds that are more different than ever? The data shows us where we are right now, but the direction we travel next, well, that remains a very open question. Thanks for joining this explainer.